honey friends. I'm Sarah, and it's time for Friday Fun with Sarah. Today we're going to talk about dryer balls. Now I have three different kinds here that I have made. They're all made off the same pattern, and we're going to use that pattern in just a second. One thing to remember, if you want the written pattern for the dryer balls, you'll find that down in the notes in that description box underneath the video right here on YouTube. Now, let's talk about dryer balls. Why dryer balls? Well, when you use, say, a dryer sheet that has all those chemicals in it, you're adding that to your clothes. And also extra expense from buying dryer sheets all the time. So, I did a little experiment. I did one dryer ball out of acrylic yarn with an acrylic yarn center. I did one dryer ball with cotton, 100% cotton with a 100% cotton center. And we'll talk about that in just a minute as well, as what the center is. And then I did one with 100% wool. It kind of looks like a lemon because when it went through the dryer, and wash machine and dryer, it felted a little bit. And so I wanted to experiment with all three types of yarn, 100% acrylic, 100% cotton, and 100% wool. That one bounced off. Okay, so what happened is the one that I did with 100% cotton did great. It bounced around inside there and did what it was supposed to do. The acrylic did fine as well. And the wool one I really liked because I felt like it did better at getting rid of the static, and it bounced around really nice and it felted. That's why you'll notice it's a little bit smaller now because it felted down just a little bit. And the more you use that wool one, the tighter it will become and more felted it will become. I do suggest that you make them with whatever yarn that you want to. And we'll talk about how to do that with the weights and that in just a second. But as far as the three between the acrylic, the wool, and the cotton, I'm going to make mine out of wool because I think it worked the best. So, I have a couple of reasons written down. First of all, in my opinion, the best yarn to use for your dryer balls is 100% wool yarn. But you can use the others as well, and they will do what they're supposed to do. I just really preferred the wool. Okay, so if you make a dryer ball, it shortens your drying time. And the reason is that heat gets trapped in that ball and it's bouncing around inside of there. Okay? Another thing is that it helps to reduce wrinkles. Again, that ball is bouncing around inside your dryer, getting rid of those wrinkles. It also helps decrease the static. I found the wool one decreased the static the most, okay? Another thing is that it does help soften your laundry. And the most important one is that it will save you some money. Now, if you like to have a certain scent or fragrance in your dryer scenting your clothes, you can use any essential oils. Just put just a tiny dot. I really like the lavender. I tried the peppermint. Don't do that. I really love the smell of peppermint. Y'all know I love peppermint flavoring, but it was just too strong for my laundry. My towels smell like candy canes. So, my favorite really is the lavender, but there are some other fragrances that you can use, and it takes just a teeny tiny drop. And I also found that that worked best in the wool. As a matter of fact, this one still smells like peppermint. Makes me want a candy cane. But like I said, if you want a little bit of fragrance, you can use just a tiny dot of an essential oil. All right? That oil's not going to affect what's in your dryer as long as it's just a teeny tiny bit. You know, I wish that they had an essential oil that smelled like linen, fresh linens. I really like that. You know, when you hang your clothes out on the line outside. I don't do that here. I don't have a clothesline. But when the kids were little, I always did their diapers out on the lines and their baby clothes, and I thought they always just came back in smelling super wonderful. So, those are my opinions on what is best with dryer balls. And now I'm going to show you how to make one for yourself. So it's up to you what fiber you want to use for your dryer balls. It will need to be a medium weight number 4, either cotton, wool, or acrylic. All right, and you're probably going to need about 3, maybe even 4 ounces, because we're going to wind a ball in for the center of our dryer ball. We're going to crochet the outside and then put that dryer ball that's wound up inside. Okay, so 3 to 4 ounces will probably do it. Now we're going to be stitching with our H-hook, which is a 5.0 millimeter crochet hook. You need a pair of scissors, and then you'll also need your needle just to weave in your ends. Now, if you have some leftover yarns that you want to try this with, it's a really good project to use up some of your leftover yarns. I do recommend that you make 3 to use in your loads of clothes because they bounce around in there and they work really good when you have 3 of them. All right? And again, you can make whichever fiber that you want. I just think wool works best. And this is a wool my husband got for me. When he goes on business trips, he always brings me back yarn. And this is 100% wool. It comes from Iceland. I believe he bought it in Norway while he was there one time for a business trip. It is made in Iceland. It's 100% wool. And he brought it back in yellow because, you know, I love yellow. So I'm going to be using this yellow for my demonstration today. We're going to begin with the crochet portion of our ball first. Then I'll show you how to roll up the center. We'll put it inside, and then we'll crochet closed the top of the ball. All right, so we're going to begin with our slip knot. And we're going to chain 2. 1 and 2. Now what we're going to do is we're going to stitch 6 single crochets in the second chain from the hook. So we'll go in, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through both loops. Oh, I forgot to tell you, you are going to need a stitch marker or some way to mark your rows because we are going to be stitching in continuous rounds. All right, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, move that tail out of the way, 5, and 6. I'm going to mark my row with this stitch marker. And if you don't have a stitch marker, you can use a paper clip, a safety pin, or even another piece of yarn, but make sure it's a different color so that you can spot that off right away. We're not going to be joining, we're going to be stitching in continuous rounds. So for row 2, we're going to stitch 2 single crochets in each of those 6. So if I can get my hook in there, there we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now here's my last stitch, so I'm going to pull my stitch marker out. 11 and 12. All right, so I stitched 2 stitches in each of those 6, which gave us 12 single crochets, and I'm going to mark that last stitch with my stitch marker. All right, now for row 3, 1 single crochet in the first stitch, 2 single crochets in the next. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 1 in the next, 5, 6, 7, and there's 16. Take out our stitch marker, 17 and 18. So for row 3, we're going to have 18 single crochets. And then I'll mark that last stitch with my stitch marker. All right, for row 4, we're going to stitch 1 single crochet in the next 2, 1, 2, and then 2 single crochets in the next, 1 and 2. And then we'll repeat this, 1 single crochet in the next 2, and 2 single crochets in the next, 1 and 2. 1, 2, and then 1 and 2. 1, 2, and 1 and 2. 1, 2, and 1 and 2. 1, 2, then I'll take my stitch marker out and stitch my last 2 stitches in that last stitch, and that's going to get us 24 single crochets around, and I'm going to mark with my stitch marker. Good in there. All right, let's do row 5. For row 5, we're just going to place 1 single crochet in each of our single crochets around. And we'll continue that all the way back around to our stitch marker, 1 single crochet in each of those 24 single crochets. I stitched 1 single crochet in each of those single crochets around, and then I moved my stitch marker. That's important because we don't want to lose track of our rows. When you stitch in continuous rounds, it's very easy to lose track of what row you're on. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to repeat row 5 for 4 more rows. We'll continue to stitch 1 single crochet in each stitch around for 4 more rows. So I continued to repeat row 5 for 4 more rows, and I left my stitch marker down here. The reason I do that is it makes it easier for me to count those rows when I'm adding a certain amount like that, like 4. So I'm going to move my stitch marker up. All right, now the next thing we need to do before we finish this is we're going to, first of all, weave in this end with our needle. And this is the inside of the ball, so don't worry about making it too pretty, because we're going to flip this over in just a second. But we want to close that hole up. We don't want a hole in the bottom of our dryer ball. There we go. All right, I'm not even going to worry about clipping that because we're going to take this and flip it over. This was the inside and this is the outside. All right, so now we're going to set this aside and we're going to grab our yarn. Now, something that you can do, wool yarn is a little bit expensive if you're just going to go out and buy some. And what you can do is you can use a different fiber that you have on hand to put inside your ball if you want to. All right, but how you roll that ball up is you want to do it nice and tight. All right, so we're going to start with our 2 fingers, wrap it around a little bit like this, then we'll turn it and we'll wrap it this way, And we'll just begin just wrapping and wrapping. I do 2 or 3 and turn, and then I'll take it and go the other direction, and you want that to be nice and tight. And then you'll wrap that until it fits easily inside your dryer ball. Okay, and it should be about this size. Let's measure it so you get a good idea. Looks like it's about 2.5 inches across. All right. You don't want it to be tight, but you want it to fit in there nice and securely. All right. And I'm going to use this one just so that you can see what we're going to do next. Okay. So wrap your ball up nice and tight and stick it inside what we've got going on so far. So now we're going to do some single crochet decreases, or stitching 2 single crochets together in order to close up the bottom of our ball. All right, so I'm going to put my hook in. I'm going to leave this ball inside. All right, that's why I wanted to use a different color so that you could see it. Okay, so we're going to single crochet in the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to stitch the next 2 together in a single crochet decrease, or what we call stitching 2 single crochets together. So we're going to go in, then we'll go in the next one, pull that loop up again, yarn over, and go through all 3 of those loops. And so what we'll do for this row is we'll stitch 1 single crochet in the next 3. 1, 2, 3. Then we'll do our decrease, or stitching 2 single crochets together. And we'll just repeat this around. 1, 2, 3. My yarn out of the way there. And we'll stitch the next 2 together. And we'll do this around till we get back over to our stitch marker. There's 3, and then stitch the next 2 together. And then we'll end with 1, 2, then we'll remove that stitch marker and 1 single crochet in the last and put our stitch marker, see, it rolled off, back in. All right, so now we're going to do that again, only we're only going to stitch in the next 2 and then do our decrease, or stitching 2 single crochets together. So 1 single crochet in the next 2, 1, 2, and then we'll stitch the next 2 together. So we want to close up the end of our ball, but we want to do it nice and neatly. 1, 2, stitch the next 2 together. 1, yarn out of the way there, 2, and stitch the next 2 together. One and 2, and then this last stitch we're just going to stitch 1 single crochet in that last stitch and then mark it with our stitch marker. And see how that hole's getting smaller and smaller? Right, so now what we're going to do is we've done 1 single crochet there, and we're going to stitch the next 2 together. So it's 1 single crochet, stitch the next 2 together. 1 single crochet, stitch the next 2 together. Got caught in my little thing in the middle there. There we go. Let's get that yarn out of the way. 1 single crochet, stitch the next 2 together, take my stitch marker out, and we'll end with 1 single crochet. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we've only got a few stitches left, and so we're going to do all together. In other words, we'll go in the next stitch and stitch the next 2 together. We'll go in the next stitch and stitch the next 2 together. The next stitch and stitch the next 2 together. And looky here, I'm going to have to add some more yarn in. That's not a problem. We'll stitch the next 2 together. Alright, and then I'll go in the next stitch. I'll add in just a little bit more yarn. And we'll finish that off. And we'll just tuck those 2 strings down inside because that happens sometimes. Alright, so we'll just tuck them inside. Won't hurt a thing. Alrighty, and then we'll stitch those last 2 stitches together. There we go. We'll go ahead and cut that. Tie that off, and then we'll just go in that next stitch. And then we'll just take that end, we'll go inside and just pull that in. And you can use your needle and weave that in if you want to. Now you can see the green coming through just a little bit, and that's okay. Because this is a dryer ball, it's not like I'm going to be wearing it on something or setting it out for somebody to see. And isn't making dryer balls a lot of fun? I really enjoyed making them, and there's lots of ways to make them as far as colors. You don't have to use solids. I just used what I had on hand. Get in your yarn stash and use what you have on hand. Now, I know some of you will say you're allergic to wool, and I understand that. I struggle a little bit with wool as well. If you make them out of acrylic and cotton, they're still going to work just fine. I just prefer the wool for the static issue. The main key is you want to use 3 in each dryer load. And I throw mine in the washer so that when I go from the washer to the dryer, everything just goes over. And then they bounce around in there. They help get things dry. They get the wrinkles out, and they help with the static. And if you use these instead of a dryer sheet, you're going to save yourself some money and have some fun too. Now, these are great for playing with the kids as well. And if they throw them around the living room, they're not going to break a lamp with one of these. You can make them in all different colors and teach them their colors. There's lots of things that you can do with these balls. They're great in the dryer and great for play. Well, thanks for watching my video today. I hope you'll come back next week because I've got something really fun for next Friday's Fun with Sarah.